this file. A year ago today, Councillor Cole and myself, Councillor Cole, of course, as chair of the TTC, stood at the Joyce Public School to announce a historic $95 million investment in the TTC through the 2015 budget. We chose a school because we wanted to drive home some of the points Councillor Cole made just a moment ago, what the investment was really all about. It was about building a great future for the city. It was about building a great future for the children at that school and across Toronto. And building a great future starts with ensuring our ability to move around. It gave me great pride on that day, as it still does, to be able to announce that children 12 and under would travel for free on the TTC as part of that 2015 investment. And I can't tell you the number of families that I hear from as I go about the city all the time, telling me what a difference that has made in the lives of themselves and of their children. We also saw, as part of this investment, the restoration of many bus and streetcar routes that were cut in the earlier administration. We introduced all-day, everyday service on bus and streetcar routes, matching them with the hours enjoyed by subway riders. In fact, I'm told this very building that we're standing in today was operating on kind of what I'll call a part-time basis, and only in the last year or so has it been restored to a 7/24 operation in terms of keeping the vehicles maintained in a kind of sensible, balanced way, given the other facilities that exist for so doing. We've reduced waiting and crowding on 21 of the TTC's key routes during rush hour. We've introduced a series of new express bus routes. You've seen the actual routes that were announced, I think, last week. They're actually going to start in March. And again, this is proof positive of some of the investments that were initially announced last year, carrying over to and actually impacting and benefiting people this year in 2016. We saw the expansion of the Blue Night Network, so people coming home late or getting to work early in the morning or in the early morning hours, meaning still I look at that as nighttime, have more options to get around. And I remember myself being astonished at the number of people who rely on the Blue overnight network to get around to and from work or even to and from other social activities. It's huge. It is a 7-figure number, and they needed a better service. We introduced proof of payment on various streetcar routes to speed up service and travel times for the more than 65 million annual riders who use the streetcar network. So these improvements make it convenient for all Torontonians to count on transit at any time of the day or night for travel. And so, for example, as a result of this investment, now 99% of the people who live in Toronto live within a 15-minute walk of overnight TTC service. And I think that's an important thing for a big, growing metropolis like ours. These improvements mean more buses and streetcars on the road. It means less crowding for passengers. It means you are more likely to be able to find a seat or to be more comfortable as a result of these improvements to service. Now, as Councillor Crawford has said, it wasn't just about last year's investment. I think it's important to remark on what was invested in last year and the excellent job that Andy Byford and his staff under Chair Josh Cole's leadership have done in implementing these changes, but the investment carries on. $50 million in new annualized funding this year, funding that will go to cut congestion, improve and expand TTC service, and reliability. To be clear, because we hear words used in the media and elsewhere all the time, the budget this year will represent, the budget as proposed, will represent a $50 million increase over the budget of last year. So when I see words used that imply that there is less being invested in public transit, I don't know how that squares with the facts that show a $50 million additional investment. And I'm prepared to give you some specifics that, again, Chair Josh Cole alluded to, and they're statistics that the TTC team, all of our men and women who run this service, should be proud of. The length of delays on Line 1 are down by 25% compared to the previous year. On Line 2, the length of delays are down by 9%. In total, the entire system saw delays reduced by 13% from 2014. So this shows not only are we adding more service and improving service and restoring services cut by my predecessor, but we are also focused, the team is focused on making sure the service is better. Some of this was achieved by adding 2 more trains to Line 1 and 2, for example, 2 morning and evening trains on the weekends, trains funded by the additional investment that was provided for last year and provided for again this year. More subway trains mean better service, mean fewer delays or less time taken to get around the city. So while this is significant progress, there are still big challenges with overcrowding and with lack of adequate transit. And that is why I have been so emphatic with my colleagues about the need to get on with building Smart Track, the need to get on with the Scarborough Transit Plan, because these are things, for example, that will provide real relief to the overcrowding, in particular on the Yonge Street subway line. And it's also why I'm here to announce that the TTC, under the leadership of Josh Cole and Andy Byford, is implementing an aggressive strategy to reduce subway delays by a further 50%. This strategy will be supported by investments made in 2015, 2016, and beyond. And I'm pleased to say, as I mentioned in the last couple of minutes, that we're well on our way to achieving that. For example, thanks to the city's investment, additional staff are being recruited to further improve the state of good repair efforts on the subway this year. And that means more resources to fix the signaling, fix the track, fix the communication systems on the subway. And as part of this investment, we've also added 6 new work cars for the TTC's maintenance fleet. These are expensive investments. They're not glamorous in the sense that people will rarely see them, but they're essential parts of making the system run better so that we can confidently stand here, because none of us would buy into setting a target of 50% additional reduction in delays by 2019 if we weren't prepared to make the investment to make sure that it could happen. And we will be adding more trains on Line 1 later this year. The bottom line is this: I take the subway virtually every day. I know how important it is to get to work on time. We need fast, reliable subway service, and that's exactly what we're focusing on delivering for the people of this city. The full impact of the improvements continues to be felt by the customers. And as Josh Cole alluded to, TTC customer satisfaction hit an all-time high last year of 81%. And even as recently as last week, I gather those numbers continue to improve. And this was even before many of the improvements have rolled out. For example, the express bus services, which have now been selected and announced and will be implemented next month. I will say to you right now that under Josh Cole's leadership, under Andy Byford's leadership, and the great team they put together, and I've had the privilege of getting to know them and seeing the work they're doing, we haven't achieved perfection, but we've achieved improvement in service that I have noticed as a customer. When I wait for the train in the morning, because sometimes I just miss the first one coming in, the next one comes sooner. It's noticeable. I asked a man on the way up here on the train, do you notice? Because, you know, it was a risky question. He might have said otherwise, but I said, do you notice the service is better? And he said, yes, it's better. But he then said to me, but keep on building more transit because we need more in this city. And I agree with him. And so we will continue to make these investments, and we will continue to invest this year in a couple of things I haven't mentioned: improved reliability of the streetcar service. It does carry a huge number of people each and every year, and we've got to do better and better at that. And of course, something that it comes and then people just accept it's been around forever. But again, a lot of people speak to me very positively about the fact that we have added 1 hour to the service on Sunday mornings. And this comes at a cost. And we're going to continue to work at finding new ways we can even further expand that Sunday morning service, because that's the reality of living in a big city in 2016, is we need better service that covers more hours of the day, more days of the week, and that is something that we are investing in this year. We're also, and I'll finish on this note, of course, relying on the fact that we're going to have support from the Government of Canada, additional support from the Government of Canada for transit. And in my meetings with the Prime Minister, with the Minister, and with others from the Toronto area, one of the most encouraging things they have said, in addition to expressing a real willingness to form a partnership with us, is that they won't be entirely focused on things that involve glitzy celebrations and ribbon cuttings, but they know that part of what we need is help with what goes on in buildings like this, where we just keep the system in better repair, make sure that we address some of those nagging maintenance questions that will make sure we can deliver a more reliable service while we build new transit. And so I'm very much looking forward to that partnership bearing fruit, as I know it will. And it's not for us, and it's not for Mr. Byford, and it's not for the members of the Commission, and it's not for Chair Josh Cole. It's for the literally hundreds of millions of people over the course of a year, 1.5 million a day, who use this service to get around. They are the people that these investments are being made for, and I'm looking forward to continuing with that over the course of this year. And we're now happy to answer your questions as best we can on this and other matters. And if you just indicate who the question is for, we'll present ourselves to the microphone. We're on the customary timetable that happens with respect to negotiations, where I think sometimes you need a little bit of an extra push to try and get the negotiations going better, and I think that that's what's happened here. You saw one no board report requested by management and one requested by organized labor, and I think now the onus rests on all of us to sit down and do what I think we certainly want to do in the city, which is to get a settlement. But it has to be a settlement, as I've said many times before, that is fair to the workers, but is also fair to the people who pay the bills, and that's the citizens of Toronto. And so I hope that we can get back to the table. We spent quite a few days there and get that done. I beg pardon? Well, we're going to work hard to make sure that we arrive at a settlement. I think the people of Toronto would expect us to make our best efforts, but they also would expect us to be responsible and prudent when, they are struggling to pay their bills, including their property tax bills to the City of Toronto. We just can't afford to assume it's, 1996 or 2006. It's 2016, and the city has its challenges, and I think that has to be reflected in the kind of agreement that we enter into with our people who do a good job for us, but that's not the issue. The issue is what is a reasonable kind of settlement that respects not only the workers but also the taxpayers.
The union says
I'm told by the chief, and I have to rely on him for the expertise in knowing what's going on in the city, that a lot of this results from two things. One is the increased number of people who are carrying guns, and this is extremely disconcerting. We have very strict laws in this country that are meant to be followed, and of course they are by the vast majority of people. And the second factor that he's brought to my attention is that this is largely, literally, of all the murders, for example, that have taken place in January, almost all of them were gang-related retaliatory activity back and forth between those gangs. If you take those out, you can't take them out. They happen and they're tragic and they're disconcerting and very upsetting for me and for everybody in the city. But if you take those out, we were down to a tiny number of homicides that took place in the city. And so, I'm confident that he is out there right now with his men and women doing the best job they possibly can for us, collecting the evidence needed to round these people up and bring them to justice. And I would only say to the citizens of Toronto two things. Number one, I would hope in any way possible you could help the police in collecting information that will help round these people up and put them away, because that's what we need to do. We need to get these antisocial people out of our midst and in custody where they belong, so that the activity, this kind of retaliatory gang activity, will stop. And the second thing I would say is that because of the nature of this activity, where it is retaliatory activity involving gangs, the vast majority of the city, at the vast majority of times, remain safe. And that we have to keep it that way. But this activity, that's not to suggest it's acceptable. It's profoundly unacceptable. And these people and what they think they can do are both profoundly unacceptable. And that's why we need to help the police to round them up.
Mr. Mayor, what do you think about the union saying that carding, the lack of carding, could be responsible for the increase of shootings?
I think that, Mr. McCormick has his job to do and I have mine. I think that, anybody who tries to suggest that any one particular thing is going to answer for the activities of gangs and how they choose to sort of engage each other and retaliate on each other is oversimplifying what is a complex and very troubling issue. And I can only tell you that what I've said to the chief is that I will stand with him in making sure that whatever he needs by way of help in dealing with this, he has that from me, and he has my support to move forward and bring these people to justice. And so I would just say that, everybody has their own explanation as to why this is going on, and I suppose if it was as simple as any one thing, somebody would have just changed that. But I don't think it's that simple, and I think it's a complicated issue, but nonetheless, the city overall remains safe, and with a big issue in front of us to deal with that I'm sure he's dealing with. I would only say that when you are looking to find a collective agreement that is fair both to the workers and to the taxpayers, you have to take a look at what people have relative and what they're asking for relative to what other people have across our society. And I would just say that there are going to have to be some discussions that take place, and they have begun to take place, about what is kind of feasible, reasonable, fair, affordable going forward for the city. And I think most people, if they were confronted by that discussion, would find that the positions we are taking are not unreasonable and are not unlike some of the situations in which they found themselves. And so I'm not going to go beyond that, because we've said we're not going to negotiate in the media. But I will only say that we're working hard to achieve a settlement and to achieve one that is fair to the workers and also to the tax.